Shinano was an aircraft carrier built by the Imperial Japanese Navy during World War II, the largest such built up to that time. Laid down in May 1940 as the third of the Yamato-class battleships, Shinano's partially complete hull was ordered to be converted to a carrier following Japan's disastrous loss of 4 fleet carriers at the Battle of Midway in mid-1942. Her conversion was still not finished in November 1944 when she was ordered to sail from the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal to Kure Naval Base to complete fitting out and transfer a load of 50 Yokosuka MXY-70K rocket-propelled kamikaze flying bombs. Hastily dispatched, she had an inexperienced crew and serious design and construction flaws, lacked adequate pumps and fire control systems, and did not even carry a single carrier aircraft. She was sunk en route 10 days after commissioning, on 29 November 1944, by 4 torpedoes from the U.S. Navy submarine Archfish. Over 1,000 sailors and civilians were rescued and 1,435 were lost, including her captain. She remains the largest warship ever sunk by a submarine. Design and description: one of 2 additional Yamato-class battleships ordered as part of the 4th Naval Armament Supplement Program of 1939. Shinano was named after the old province of Shinano, following the Japanese ship naming conventions for battleships. She was laid down on 4 May 1940 at the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal to a modified Yamato-class design. Her armor would be 10 to 20 mm thinner than that of the earlier ships, as it had proved to be thicker than it needed to be for the desired level of protection, and her heavy anti-aircraft guns would be the new 65 caliber 10 cm Type 98 dual-purpose gun, as it had superior ballistic characteristics and a higher rate of fire than the 40 caliber 12.7 cm Type 89 guns used by her half-sisters. Construction and conversion: as with Shinano's half-sisters Yamato and Musashi, the new ship's existence was kept a closely guarded secret. A tall fence was erected on 3 sides of the graving dock, and those working on the conversion were confined to the yard compound. Serious punishment, up to and including death, awaited any worker who mentioned the new ship. As a result, Shinano was the only major warship built in the 20th century to have avoided being officially photographed during its construction. The ship is only known to have been photographed twice. On 1 November 1944, by a Boeing B-29 Super Fortress reconnaissance aircraft from an altitude of 9,800 meters, and 10 days later, by a civilian photographer aboard a harbor tug during Shinano's initial sea trials in Tokyo Bay. In December 1941, construction on Shinano's hull was temporarily suspended to allow the IJN time to decide what to do with the ship. She was not expected to be completed until 1945, and the sinking of the British capital ships Prince of Wales and Repulse by IJN bombers had called into question the viability of battleships in the war. The Navy also wanted to make the large dry dock in which the ship was being built available, which required either scrapping the portion already completed or finishing it enough to launch it and clear the dry dock. The IJN decided on the latter, albeit with a reduced workforce which was expected to be able to launch the ship in 1 year. In the month following the disastrous loss of 4 fleet carriers at the June 1942 Battle of Midway, the IJN ordered the ship's unfinished hull converted into an aircraft carrier. Her hull was only 45% complete by that time, with structural work complete up to the lower deck and most of her machinery installed. The main deck, lower side armor, and upper side armor around the ship's magazines had been completely installed, and the forward barbets for the main guns were also nearly finished. The Navy decided that Shinano would become a heavily armored support carrier, carrying reserve aircraft, fuel and ordnance in support of other carriers, rather than a fleet carrier. As completed, Shinano had a length of 265.8 meters overall, a beam of 36.3 meters and a draft of 10.3 meters. She displaced 65,800 metric tons at standard load, 69,151 metric tons at normal load and 73,000 metric tons at full load. Shinano was the largest aircraft carrier yet built, a record she held until the 81,000 metric ton Forrestal was launched in 1954. She was designed for a crew of 2,400 officers and enlisted men. Machinery: Shinano's machinery was identical to that of her half-sisters. The ships were fitted with 4-geared steam turbine sets with a total of 150,000 shaft horsepower, each driving one propeller shaft, using steam provided by 12 Camp-on water tube boilers. The ships had a designed speed of 27 knots, but Shinano never conducted full-speed sea trials, so her actual performance is unknown. She carried 9,047 metric tons of fuel oil, which gave her an estimated range of 10,000 nautical miles at 18 knots. Flight deck and hangar: Shinano was designed to load and fuel her aircraft on deck where it was safer for the ship. Experiences in the battles of Midway and the Coral Sea had demonstrated that the existing doctrine of fueling and arming their aircraft below decks was a real danger to the carriers if they were attacked while doing so. Much of Shinano's hangar was left open for better ventilation, although steel shutters could close off most of the hangar sides if necessary. This also allowed ordnance or burning aircraft to be jettisoned into the sea, something that the earlier carriers could not do with their enclosed hangars. The carrier's 256-meter flight deck was 40.0 meters wide and overhung her hull at both ends, supported by pairs of pillars. A large island, modeled on that fitted on Taiho, was sponsored off the starboard side and integrated with the ship's funnel. Much like the earlier Taiho design, Shinano's armored flight deck functioned as the ship's strength deck and copied British practices seen in their illustrious class carriers. Designed to resist penetration by 500-kilogram bombs dropped by a dive bomber, the flight deck consisted of 75 mm of armor plate laid over 20 mm of ordinary steel. It was equipped with 15 transverse arrestor wires and 3 crash barriers that could stop a 7,500-kilogram aircraft. 5 of these wires were positioned further forward to allow the ship to land aircraft over the bow in case the aft portion of the flight deck was unusable. Unlike the British carriers, Taiho and Shinano had unarmored sides to their hangars. For stability reasons, the latter only had a single hangar that was 163.4 by 33.8 meters, with a minimum width of 19.8 meters aft, and had a height of 5.0 meters. The forward area of the hangar was dedicated to maintenance and storage facilities. Aircraft were transported between the hangar and the flight deck by 2 elevators, one at each end of the hangar on the center line of the flight deck. The larger of the two measured 15.0 by 14.0 meters. They were capable of lifting aircraft weighing up to 7,500 kilograms. The ship had an aviation gasoline capacity of 720,000 liters. Large ventilation fans were installed on the hangar deck to expel fumes in case of damage to the gasoline system. Taiho had been sunk by an explosion of gasoline fumes. Canvas wind scoops could also be rigged over the elevator opening to force more air inside. The ship's organic air group was intended to consist of 18 Mitsubishi A7M Repu fighters, 18 Aichi B-7A Yusei torpedo dive bombers, and 6 Nakajima C-6N Saiyun reconnaissance aircraft. The remainder of the hangar space would have held up to 120 replacement aircraft for other carriers and land bases. Armament: Shinano's primary armament consisted of 1640 caliber 12.7-CENTIMETER Type 89 dual-purpose guns in 8 twin mounts, 2 at each corner of the hull. When firing at surface targets, The guns had a range of 14,700 meters. They had a maximum ceiling of 9,440 meters at their maximum elevation of 90 degrees. Their maximum rate of fire was 14 rounds a minute. Their sustained rate of fire was around 8 rounds per minute. The ship also carried 105 Type 96 25mm light Aa guns in 35 triple gun mounts. These 25mm guns had an effective range of 1,500–3,000 meters, and an effective ceiling of 5,500 meters at an elevation of plus 85 degrees. This was the standard Japanese light Aa gun during World War II, but it suffered from severe design shortcomings that rendered it largely ineffective. According to historian Mark Stiller, the weapon had many faults, including an inability to handle high-speed targets because it could not be trained or elevated fast enough by either hand or power. Its sights were inadequate for high-speed targets. It possessed excessive vibration and muzzle blast. These guns were supplemented by a dozen 28-round Aa rocket launchers. Each 12-centimeter rocket weighed 22.5 kilograms and had a maximum velocity of 200 meters per second. Their maximum range was 4,800 meters. 4 Type 94 high-angle fire control directors were fitted to control the Type 89 guns. The two controlling the port side guns were adjacent to their guns, while the starboard directors were mounted fore and aft on the island. They could control all of the forward and rear guns respectively as necessary. Type 22 and Type 13 air search radars may have been fitted. Armor. The ship's original waterline armor belt thickness of 400 mm was only retained where it had already been installed abreast the magazines, and reduced to 160 mm elsewhere. Below it was a strake of armor that tapered in thickness from 200 mm to 75 mm at its bottom edge. The flat portion of the armor deck over the machinery and magazine spaces, ranging from 100 to 190 mm, was retained, and the sloped portion that angled downward towards the bottom of the main armor belt was 230 mm thick. Large external anti-torpedo bulges below the waterline provided the main defense against torpedoes. Backed up by an armored bulkhead extending down from the belt armor, the bulkhead was intended to prevent splinters from piercing the main hull and, though not watertight, was backed by a second one which was. The joint between the upper and lower armor belts was weak and proved to be a serious problem when struck by torpedoes. Even though Shinano's of gas tanks were protected by armor that could resist a 155 mm shell, the IJN attempted to isolate the tanks from the rest of the ship with a cofferdam. However, the investigation into the loss of Taiho had revealed that her of gas tanks had sprung leaks after she was torpedoed. The resulting fumes then penetrated the cofferdam and exploded. Therefore, the IJN thought it prudent to fill the empty spaces between the tanks and the cofferdam with 2,400 metric tons of concrete to prevent any fumes from escaping. Launching the ship was originally scheduled for completion in April 1945. But construction was expedited after the defeat of the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, as the IJN anticipated that the United States would now be able to bomb Japan with long-range aircraft from bases in the Mariana Islands. The builder was unable to increase the number of workers on Shinano and could not meet the new deadline of October. Even so, the pressure to finish as quickly as possible led to poor workmanship by the workforce. Shinano's launch on 8 October 1944, with Captain Toshio Abe in command, was marred by what some considered an ill-omened accident. During the floating out procedure, one of the caissons at the end of the dock unexpectedly lifted as the water rose to the level of the harbor. The sudden inrush of water into the graving dock pushed the carrier into the forward end, damaging the bow structure below the waterline and requiring repairs in dry dock. These were completed by the 26th of October.